Hello, hello. Welcome to Fall for Watercolor art class. Today we are going to be painting feathers. I'm so excited. We're going to have so much fun. Ooh, looks like my mic is doing something weird. So let me just check that. Make sure y'all can hear me. Perfect. Okay, I think it's fine. So I have some photos here from a gentleman I met named Matt. He has Matt's Moments Photography, and we're going to be using some of the pictures from his lovely Instagram page as reference points from which to draw our images today. So I've linked his Instagram page over in the comments. Be sure to check him out. He's local to Washington, super talented, and I think he's got some great examples of like the layering and laying of feathers from which to draw on or paint on in this case. La, 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 la. Okay, so when we zoom, I guess without further ado, quick housekeeping tips. Don't forget to enter the Fall for Watercolor Challenge with the link in my bio. We've got daily paintings. We've got live streams. Today we're doing feathers. Tomorrow, I can't remember what we're doing, but I'll tell you at the end of class. And yeah, we've got, after today, we've got 4 more live streams. So get psyched. Okay, let's get into it. I'm super excited, and I feel like this is going to be a juicy lesson. So when we're looking at a bird, like I did in the squirrel picture that we did yesterday, we're going to paint the background first. And the reason for this is, and we're just going to do like a little practice kind of zoom in here, and then we'll paint a larger owl. But let's just take a look at some feathers. So you can see, like, let's just kind of squint your eyes and look, and we see like some dark blue in here. We see a lot of light right here, like almost white, maybe a little like green in here, and just like a nice gray, like warm gray down here. So what I would do, and we're going to do this like roll quick and dirty. What I would do is get kind of just your basic shape, and I'd fill it in with water. Okay. And this is, yeah, quick and dirty. So I'm filling it in with water. I'm doing it a little bit darker so you guys can see. I'm leaving some of that neck just not painted. We're not doing it. Like there's nothing anatomically precise about this situation. We're just going in for it. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to drop a little bit of blue in here. I like to create this kind of under layer. I might do like a little kind of warm green, kind of reflecting off the grass that's in the background there. I don't want to get too Oh no! Oh my gosh. How long have I been muted for? Okay, not too long. The live just started. Okay. So what we're doing is we're creating a base of the bird's feathers. So we're taking a look at where some of the darks are, where some of the lights are. It looks like here I need like a lot more darkness. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And let's grab a little bit more of my indigo. I feel like we can get kind of drama in there. And then I'm adding a little bit more darkness here at the top of the head. I've left the eye like unpainted, so it's white. And then I have also left some of this area really, really light. And we're not going to get too far into the details here. Like this is just kind of quick and dirty. But when we are painting a bird, the reason why I like to do this underlayer is because there is so much vibrance and texture. And if you are just going in and painting every single feather, you're going to miss some of that smoothness and softness and shininess that we're seeing just across the sheen of the feathers and the bird's body. So that's why we do this underlayer. It's great to work wet and wet with this so we can get some really fun, interesting colors. This is where you can really pull in the colors from the reflections. Like, I feel like we're kind of getting like a little bit of a purple there, maybe. I don't know. I'm just throwing some color in here. You can make it whatever you want. This bird is black, but if you look closely, like it's really so much more interesting than black. And so we're going to get into the granularity of the feathers once this is dry. So to quickly explain what we're doing here. Oh, so Tracy says feathers, animals, birds, 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 just a Halloween eagle, aka a crow. That's so funny. So what we're going to be doing as we do the feathers, hold on, quick coffee sip. Gotta wet my whistle. We are going to be creating the feathers, but if we zoom in, I've got a couple other of his photos. This is Matt's Moments Photography. So let's just look at this bird here. So if you look at the feathers, we've got a lot of these cool little spiky doodads, and this can be really fun to add in afterwards with like a bleed-proof white if you're doing like really big detail, right? But if we're just trying to get kind of the edge of these feathers, you'll notice the highlight is at the top of the feathers. Like let's zoom in real big. The highlight is kind of right here, and then the low light is actually, the shadow is under the feather. So as we've been talking about building up layers of color with watercolor, we're going to keep our lights unpainted or lighter, and then the dark is actually going to come. So we're going to be layering on the dark. So instead of looking at the feather, we're almost looking at the inverse of the feather. So we're going to be painting the shadow that comes in from the feather. So let's take another look at this guy. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be painting this line and bringing that down. We're going to be painting this line and bringing that down. And a really fun way to get this texture is to bring some of those little feather pieces up from our underlayer. So, you know, this is all fun to talk about, but let's actually get into it. So I'm going to take our crow, and we're not going to do a whole bunch of this because I do want to get into our little owl. But I'm just going to kind of show you the basic principles. So let me mute it while I do my blow dryer. Hang tight. Okay, I think that's good. So let's go take a look. Let's zoom in on this little cutie pie. And if you haven't yet, please be sure to like and subscribe so everybody can get more access to watercolor. Okay, so I gotta bring the photo up so I can see. That's good. Zoom in here so you can see what we got going on. So as we are painting this, let's see if I can zoom in any more on my painting. I cannot. So we're going to be kind of looking here at what I'm going to be here. Let me do it bigger on this sheet of paper. So we're going to be painting the underlayer of these feathers. So we'll paint the layer, and then we're going to use our brush, a damp brush, to feather it out. So once again, we'll paint the feather, and we'll use our pigment here at the top. And then I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to wipe it on my towel, and then I'm going to feather it out. See how I'm really pushing down with my brush here? Kind of shimmying like a weird little shimmy dance. And then once that is dry, we'll come down and do this feather. And we're creating this cool layering feel of these feathers. And while this is still dry, we can even take our color that we were using underneath and add a little bit of, oh, can you see that? A little bit of that like feathery pattern. And if you want the shadow to be a little darker, you can go ahead and add more color in there. So let's go ahead and feather that out. So we start to build color and layers in this way. And then imagine it's over the wet and wet. So it's not just white. So we're getting this really cool depth from this technique over our wet and wet. So what this would look like, let's just do a couple feathers in here and then we'll get into our owl. I feel like we probably could have done a whole thing on this crow, but the owl's really cute. So I don't want to miss it. So again, this is not a super detailed situation. Probably using a bigger brush than I need to, but just take a look. And you don't have to do every single feather either. Like, it's okay to just kind of leave something to the imagination, like let it fill in the blanks. So let your mind fill in the blanks. So I'm looking at let's back up a little bit. So you can see some nice definition here. But where it gets really light, I might actually just leave that untouched. Okay. Let's see. And up here, so feathers all have different textures. So up here, we don't really have too much feather action. So I might just do a little bit of a drier brush here, since it's a little bit darker, but we don't have like the layering of the feathers. It's more like little hairs almost. You can just kind of fuzzy up the ends there with just a very damp, very ever so damp, but mostly dry brush. Okay, so these are really light, but I think this is a great place to start. As you get darker, you can add more color, but you can always do more layers, right? But I think just kind of making sure that you like what you got going on first is a really great first step. So let's see, something like that. Okay, so you can see how we're starting to build these feathers in, and they become a little bit less distinct as we move down. So maybe it's just a little messier. Maybe it's a little wetter. However you Or if you want to get like really granular with it, you can do that too. Okay, let's just take a quick look at the wings. So these are more smooth. So let's go ahead and do like from right here. Oh, it's still a little wet there, but I'm going to pretend it's not, and I'm just going to keep painting. So here, I'm not even really, there's like a little bit of highlight, so I might leave a tiny bit of white. Can you see that part where I didn't paint in there? Just to give a little sense of some of the feathers moving. All right, same thing with the other side. We're going to do here. So with these big long feathers, you don't need to get into every fiber, every hair or feather piece, right? You can really just create the sense of the feather. And so again, like I definitely needed some like anatomy help here, but you get the idea, right? And then down here, it looks like we've got some really dark, and I'm just creating that little scallop shape. And I'm going to actually just kind of blend this out into a much darker color. We've got the scallop shape, so we still have the idea of that feather, but again, we're not going to get too deep into the feather world down here. It's a little underbelly because we don't need to. We have a lot of feathers happening up here. So let's do this on the cutest little, ow! Okay, look at this guy. So again, Matt's Moments Photography is the origin of all of this. If you're wanting to learn more about like the bokeh effect, we could totally get into a whole thing. So let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to learn. Right now, we're just focusing on the bird in the foreground. But maybe we can do like a little bonus one if people are still sticking around. Okay, so step one, what do we start with? Our wash. So I'm gonna mix up just a nice light little wash. This is just, there are a lot of dark parts of this bird, but we are really just kind of mixing up like an oatmeal color here. We don't want it to go too dark. So I've got some burnt sienna. I've got a little bit of raw umber. I've got kind of a maroony color here. And I am, maybe a little more of that raw sienna. Okay. So I am going to just do like a nice wash. I'm going to skip the eyes. Okay. And I'm going to do a nice juicy little wash here. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about doing the fur, like kind of allowing the fur to extend past the painting by creating like a wet water barrier around the painting. This would be a great opportunity for that if you want. So what you do is just wet with plain water and allow and paint in the lines of your outline. Being careful not to go too far to the edge. So you'd kind of paint the water outside of the lines, but then you'd let the paint stay just inside the lines so the paint will travel a little bit, but not too much. But I think we're going to make this guy nice and crisp. What the heck? I keep getting muted. So you can see the shininess on the camera. There should be like a fair amount of water in here because we really want to be able to do this wet and wet action. So let's go ahead and zoom in on our bird. Now that we've wet the entire area, we want to have time to work on this shape. So it's nice and juicy. Like if I were to move it around, it's The water is shining. Nothing too crazy is happening. It's not like overflowing, but it's also not, it's not going to dry up anytime soon. So we've got some nice kind of darker bits right here. I've traced a little bit where the feathers are, and this is just freehand, so it's not, you know, exactly where everything is, but I'm just taking a moment to add some darkness to the darker parts here. We've got some nice, exciting eye action over here. And I like just adding a little bit of feathering. And so right now I'm just dabbing in some color underneath where the feathers are, where those shadows are going to happen. So if here is the feather, we've got a little bit of a shadow underneath, and we're going to deepen that with the layers. Okay, we've got like a nice little feather kind of plopping over the mossy log here. We can probably just do a little bit of a mossy log. Why not, right? I'm making this nice and textury. While that's drying, I do want it to dry like, and I'm going to let this kind of, I feel like this bird and this log are like, or branch are just very entwined intimately. So we're going to let it become part of the branch with that wet and wet. I don't really want to belabor this branch here because that's not the, it's not the star of the show, you know? So, all right. So as this is drying, I want to wait until this part up here is a little bit drier than when I first started. So I think it's getting close to that zone, and I am going to mix up some more brown while I'm waiting. Where is that? Here it is. And I'm going to tap my brush on my towel here. And now that this is a little bit drier, I can add in some somewhat dry texture to get that like fun fuzziness that's happening to this cutie. So around the eyes, maybe a little bit in the middle here. I feel like we could really kind of add a little bit onto each feather. So I've traced the outline of the feathers. You can see the pencil lines here at this stage, but when we're done, you're not going to be able to see those pencil lines at all. So this is just giving that soft kind of textury pattern of the feathers. Let's add just like a little bit more right here. We were watching Pooh Bear last night. So this is making me, or the Tigger movie, excuse me. Making me think of Owl. All right. So now another thing that we can do, I'm going to just grab my little paper towel. There's some parts that are a little bit wider that I really want to emphasize. So I'm bunching up my paper towel, and I'm going to dab, dab, dab right by the eyes because we've got that nice light fuzzy. And I like that it still has a little bit of the color from the wash underneath, but it's not, what am I trying to say? It's not like totally white, but it is lighter than the rest of it. So I just want to give that little moment here. And I'm just going to lighten a little bit there, and we're good to go. Okay. Whew. Let's take a sip of coffee, and then we'll get back into it. I'm going to blow dry, actually, and then we'll blow dry this, and then we can get into the feather detail. Doot. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm such a messy painter. Like, do you see this? I'm like making such a mess. That's why I have to be part of the splatter and the bloom, right? Because it's, I'm not tidy enough to keep it. Okay, so we're gonna kind of chill on the head a little bit, but we are gonna get into the feathers. So I think I'm gonna work my way up. I'm gonna start at the bottom. And the reason I'm doing this is because if I were to blend down, then we'd have to dry in between each one. So what I'm looking for is I'm kind of squinting my eyes and looking for the shape of darkness. So here we have this kind of, I don't know, like a raindrop shape. So let's go ahead and add that in. I'm mixing up, what color is this? I think it is it Venetian red and some burnt umber. And I don't think that is Venetian red. I actually don't. Oh, that's dragon's blood. Yes, we are here for it. I'm going to add in a little indigo to give it just a nice dark shadow. If you see where I'm mixing here, I've got the darker side over here. I've got the lighter side over here. It's kind of creeping into the yellow, which is what I like. So, all right. So let's make that nice dark shape. I don't want a ton of moisture on my brush because this is pretty dry work here. So I'm looking at where that feather shape goes, and I am creating that raindropish shape. And if you were to take like a picture that you took and trace out everything, you could totally really, like if you're nervous about, oh, I don't know, I'm not used to like following the shapes or whatever, you can totally just, draw it out actually on your paper, and use it that way. So here, what I'm doing right here is these shapes, these little ridges, and it's not quite, they should be a little thinner at the top. I don't know what's going on with my brush, but I think it's, oh, that's my coffee. I think it's fine for now. I'm actually going to use this brush, I think, my Princeton Real Value brush. Okay, so then we've got another feather action kind of right here. This is going to go down into the bush, and it's this, not bush, the branch. So this one is, there's still some feathers under here, but I think for the purposes of this painting. So you notice how I painted a pretty juicy little layer of paint at the bottom there. And then what I'm doing is I'm cleaning my brush, I'm drying it, and I'm shimmying it out where just the tip is touching that darker line. And this gives me, that way I'm not applying my water like directly into here and make it just a big mess. Like we're just gently relaxing that line with a slightly damp brush. Okay, let's go ahead and kind of work on this line right here. So this one's not as harsh as the other ones. So I think that's probably pretty good. Kind of looks like a juicy little booty, like the owl's turning around and we're looking at its butt. It's kind of funny. What is wrong with me? Have you seen those, like, what's her name? Mosley, their name, drawings of like the peach and the butt and stuff. I don't know. And all the fruit has like these cute little butts. I'm gonna get flagged. Oh gosh. Anyway. Okay, so I'm just gently coaxing that shadow to be really gentle. I don't really want any harsh lines in here. All right, let's build up some layers on that little booty. Oh, why that makes me laugh so much. Okay, so we're gonna go in here. There's another little feather. So this line, I want to be careful to leave the tip of that feather untouched because I don't want it to get lost if I were to paint in this little line here, then we'd lose that feather because this is all still wet. Okay, so let's keep adding in some feathers. So here I'm noticing that there's like a little bit of a divot. Like there's a feather here. And so I'm working pretty dry. It's a little bit drier, I think, than I want. So I've just kind of dampened my brush and I'm going back over what I've painted and softening that out. And then let's go ahead and create. So I'm working on this feather right here. All right. Nice. All right. So there's more feathers in here, but it's kind of wet. So let's move on to another part. This one has kind of like a second little feather item here. And I love how that just spilled in there. So I'm kind of, the parts where it's overlapping, if it's still wet, I'm okay with that. I think that's kind of fun. Again, I'm going to smooth out this without connecting the lines here. So I'm just gently touching that edge that I want to soften with my pretty dry brush, okay? So let's do this one. Got like kind of some nice dark depth there. Again, looking at the shapes that we're creating with the darkness. So the tricky thing with this is that we're not painting the thing, you know, we're painting the absence of the thing. So good at words. We are not painting the feather, right? We're painting the shadows that the feather creates. And as we're getting into more detail, we can totally add the details of the feathers, but we can't do that without the shapes of the feathers first. So this is a little bit of a darker shadow, so I'm adding a little bit more color in here. As always, remember you can always make it darker, but you can't make it lighter, okay? So once again, we're keeping the edge, the bottom edge of the feather crisp, and we are fading out the rest that's underneath. So in the shadow, we're fading it out and softening that. All right, so please, please, please ask questions. If you're not tuning in live, that's totally fine. You can still ask questions. I will get a notification. I can come in and answer it. Okay, so here you see we're going into the feather. We're going into this feather, but this is the feather edge that we're creating the shadow from. So we're going to soften this edge. Okay, but we're going to leave this edge crisp. All right, so let's get into kind of like trying to decide where I want to go. It's like a little puzzle. Let's see. I think we could go do like a little. And I like to pull in different colors too while we're still working wet and wet. Like this is a little bit more red. And I like that it just adds a little dimension. We'll add like some little feathery wisps in there, right? Now that we're getting into the action here. Okay, softening that out. And let's see, I'm gonna do a nice gentle shadow here. And it kind of gets a little bit darker, like right there. So I'm working in this area here. This works really well for petals too, y'all. This technique. Okay, so this is really interesting. It kind of goes whoop, whoop. So it's like almost like a little braid. So I gotta look at that for a little bit. Sometimes you just gotta like sit and simmer, you know. Do like this little crissy-crossy situation. So I find sometimes if you think about, don't think about the feather, but think about the shape of the shadow, and squinting can just really help with this. I think a lot of times it's easy to be like, well, this is what a feather looks like, and your brain is tricking you, right? So let's see. Where is this? I'm gonna come on down here. So I'm working on this little shape. Oh my gosh, I'm having so much fun with this. I haven't painted a bird in a long time. It's so fun. So my friend Renee from Poppy Painting Studio, she has been on a bird kick. She's doing some commissions right now, but she has been painting the cutest little birds. They are just so darling. She has such a like whimsical, lovely style. So definitely check her out on Instagram, Poppy Painting Co. Okay, let's see. We've got this here. All right, so this edge is kind of getting weird. I think I need to simmer on it a little bit. Sometimes if I'm like, what am I doing here? I just take a little break and then I come back to it with a little bit more clarity. Now I'm feeling like I want to define this top feather because I just feel like I don't know. He just needs a little color right now. So let's do this. We got. Uh-oh, I spilled some water there, so gotta use my little paper towel. If you ever spill, paper towel is a really great thing to have handy. Oh my gosh, don't you feel like, I don't know, he's just got such a personality. I love this little guy. All right. You'll just like, what the heck are you talking about, Kate? You crazy. All right. This one has, this is kind of an interesting, like, all right. Let's see. So this goes, how did it go? So we're getting some nice layers in. If I was doing this like super hyper realistic, I would have gone in and like used a reference copy and truly captured like very much more detail of where the feathers are and all that jazz. But I think this is perfectly sufficient as you're learning about feathers and how they get placed. There's no need to like capture every single feather. Nobody's got time for that, you know? So I'm just gonna I need to do something in here to differentiate the head, but we're just not there yet. And this has some nice little featheration. Is that a word? So I'm just adding, we got some personality in these feathers here. So I'm adding the little lines there. And we'll let that be because I do want to get back in there. But okay, so that's that. I feel like we can do maybe, so I'm working on this little sliver. Where is that coming from? Oh, we've got like a feather, got a feather here. And this is something too, I think, you know, if an ornithologist was looking at this, they'd be like, well, that's not how that feather lays, right? But we're just having fun. But again, if you're painting like someone's beloved bird, it can always help. Oh, so here's an example. I'm painting this shape and I'm like, this is the shape of a feather, but it's actually coming out towards us. So it's really more flat. And that's just my brain playing a little joke on me. It's a little tricky trick. Okay. So let's get into that. Let's do this little ones. I feel like, actually, I'm going to wait because I think I need to define this little cutie a little bit more. So let's do, I can do right here. Okay. If you're like, whoa, I put down way too much paint, you can always dab it up with your paper towel. And I'm not really sure how I want this edge to go, so I'm just lightening it up with my paper towel, and I can go in later and add a little more pizzazz. So yeah, once again, I think I'm imagining the shape of feathers and it's throwing me off. I think that's really common. Sometimes people will turn their paintings upside down, and that will kind of help with the like, where am I? Let's see. Sometimes you just get lost in the feathers, you know. Okay, so this. But yeah, you can turn your paper upside down and then your reference photo upside down. That way your mind, whatever your mind is filling in the blanks, like your mind's supposed to do that, right? Like you get a lot of information every day and it's quite frankly too much, right? So your brain is used to like filtering out the information and making sense. And so when we are painting or drawing or whatever it is that you're doing, it can make it kind of tricky because your brain is trying to fill in the gaps and it's like that's not what's actually on the page. So just some food for thought, you know. I think that's super common. It's also watercolor can be tricky too because you can't really paint on an easel if you're doing really wet and wet. So just take a moment to like lift your painting up and look at it straight on. For me, this is straight on. Hold it up next to your reference photo and make sure that it's not like slanted sideways because you are coming at it from an angle as well. Coffee break. Okay. Let's keep on keeping on. So you see, like, this is pretty methodical work here. But if you like puzzles, I think this could be for you. Now is a great time to ask questions. Oh my gosh, you guys, I just finally scheduled our Fall for Watercolor finale party. So if you've been following along, which obviously you have, you're here. It is going to be, you're going to get an email about it, but it's going to be on November 1st in the evening. And we are going to have like a fun, crafty Zoom chat. So we get to like see each other's faces and chit chat and hear all about all your painting adventures. So I'm super, super excited about that. We're going to have so much fun. Oops. So I didn't wait for that to be dry, but we're just going to keep painting because we are rebels. And we can always come back in and like define it a little bit more later. Okay, let's see. We've got a lot of like feather action over here on the butt area. But I think I'm going to let that be like left to interpretation. Okay. I think that ship has sailed on my painting. But we can do a little bit of whatever's going on here. So I'm just hopping around my painting, making sure I'm not getting areas wet that I want to for the most part. I like coming in with different colors here. I think it's nice to just add a little variety. But if you're finding like the color mixing is feeling really overwhelming, you can totally do a monochromatic exercise, right? Ooh, so Ella's coming in with bats with all my spooky love. I can't seem to get those right. Bats. Ooh, bats. That would be fun. Yeah, let me think on that. I've never even thought about painting a bat. But I will think on that, Elle, and get back to you because I feel like that is super fun. Okay, so here I'm working on this little area right in there. And you can see we've got a lot of feathers here, but they're darker. So I'm just darkening that whole area with the shadow, and then we'll come back in and get the individual shadows, right? So same thing here. We've got a nice deep shadow. Ooh, it's a lot of paint. So I've come back in with my dry brush. And I'm just creating the shape of that shadow. And I'm going to start kind of connecting these a little bit. While we're here, if you wanted to do these individually, you totally could. I'm kind of making a mess of it. But I think that's good for now. Let's see. We can get into this wing situation. So I'm going to start working like maybe right there where I left off before. So let's do, I'm going to do underneath that piece. And then I'm going to do on top of that little sliver. Okay. And then I'm going to soften the edges. Let's see, there's like something happening right here. Okay. And that shadow, I can soften this a little bit, but honestly, that line is pretty pronounced. So I am not going to soften it too much. Remember, like shading is amazing, and try not to overshade because sometimes leaving the brushwork or leaving that strong line is like the power move, right? So here it almost looks like I'm outlining this feather, which in a sense I am. And I'm just going back in. If you're finding that you're having trouble blending this line out, it is probably because your paint is too dry when you're applying it. So you might need to make it just a little bit more damp. Okay, let's see. I feel like I got a little crazy in here and we've taken a bit of a breach from reality, but I think we're still able to get the idea. So we came in, we're gonna come in here. And if you're like, okay, Kate, I get it, and you want to fast forward to like the eyes, if you're watching this back, like, you know, totally. Elle, if you're still in the chat, specifically, what about bats are you finding difficult to paint? Is it like their texture or? If people are also having, other people are having trouble with bats, let me know. All right. I'm in the zone, you can tell, because I'm not talking. I find it really difficult to paint tidy. Like whenever I'm doing these tutorials, I find it's really tricky to paint and tell you about the things at the same time. And paint well, you know, like like I can show you what I'm talking about, but if it's coming to like, you know, actually making it look legit good, like I feel like I just paint really sloppy, like a lot more spills and stuff. So just saying, that's the sacrifice I make for the craft. I don't know. And so we're really not using a ton of paint. Like if you've ever used our paint kits and you're like, oh my God, how are you gonna get this painting done with such little paint? Well, there's actually quite, you can get really far with not too much watercolor paint. So we're getting some very cool fluffy texture here. Let's get some of this action. I feel like these feathers are kind of like creating this kind of shape, this little triangle. Whoop. Okay, and here the shadow is kind of going the other direction. So let's see. Like I'm blending upwards, which we hadn't really done yet. And there's a line here, but I'm going to deepen that in a bit, so I'm not too worried about it. I think that's probably good where that is. And let's see. And since we can always get darker, you know, there's room to build and make some adjustments or tweaks as we're going, you know. Okay. So here I'm going to darken this underlayer right here. I'll blend that out. You can even go back into each of the feathers to add a little bit more definition. I'm going to definitely do that here. And this is going to help give us an even better definition of the feathers. When you go back in the second time, you know we level layer. All right, so let me know if you have any questions, you know. Let's see. Okay. So here I'm going to go back in and kind of define a little bit more some of those ones that I was like too impatient to wait for the wet and wet to dry. Gotta go paint. I like using these Princeton real value brushes for my shading. I find they're really snappy, which doesn't mean they're just fun and quick. It just what it's referring to is that they kind of bounce back. So I find they're really nice for getting that wiggle. Sometimes if they're, if they're too soft, it can be hard to get the shape that you want. All right, so we're getting there. We're getting there. I think I need to kind of define the top of our owl because I just feel like we're kind of nearly a headless Nick over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start defining the top of that feather. It is a little bit darker back there. And I'll just fade that up away from the top of this feather so that we can just kind of anchor our light and dark points because otherwise it's just this weird floating head. And I'm just being careful not to cover over the white parts that are part of the eyeballs. We're just gently fading this. We've got plenty of time. I mean, I should probably get to work sometime, but I'm having too much fun. All right, so let's do, let's see. I think we've kind of got some feather action happening here. And like that. Okay. There we go. Oh my gosh, this guy is so cute. All right. I may be getting a little bit like creative interpretations over here, but we're okay with it. So, you get the idea. This builds and builds and builds. We could really build up our moss. You can get darker, let's kind of show how getting darker in the crannies can really make a huge difference. So let's look and kind of see where some of our darkest points are. That's going to be like right in here. So let's just really deepen some of these crannies. Okay, so I've painted the darkest parts, and now we're going to fade it out along the lines that we've already created. Okay. And this part, we're not going to fade too much because it actually kind of is coming out of the dark. All right, so we've got a little darkness there. And I like adding in this indigo as like an element of dark. I think it's kind of a nice shift from like a black. I just think it adds a little bit more dimension. So let's see. Okay. You can see kind of off to the sides, these feathers get like a little bit less defined, and I am following suit. I'm not getting too into it. Here our proportions are a little off, but we're okay with it. All right, and then definitely down under here, we'll add a little bit more depth, and then we'll talk about adding detail. To the feathers. Sorry, I like totally paused mid-sentence. Like, yes, detail. Okay. All right, so I think that's, good enough for now. We've got, oh my God, I'm not going to stop, am I? No, of course not. Okay, stop it. All right, so we've got a lot of really cool feathery detail. But as you can see, there's a lot of detail on the bird itself. So what you can do is you can take a brush that's pretty dry, and it looks like there's kind of a line down the middle of the feather. Oh, that's even too wet. Too wet. And just gently skate your brush across that area. Okay, we're not going for every single feather space here. We're just getting the sense of the texture. Okay, again, super dry. Got some nice texture there. Kind of looking at where the lines are pointing on the feather, and that's giving me a guide. This will help define the shape of the feather too. Like which way everything's pointing, give a sense of direction. All right, let's see. This one's kind of going this way. Another cool way to do this would be to have added salt in our underlayer if you didn't want to get too granular into the texture. You totally could have added salt. Ooh, Angela's popping in and says that, oh, okay. Tracy's asking, how do you make this look so easy? My little owl is a mess. I mean, definitely lots and lots of practice. I think this shading stuff is really hard to get a handle on because it really requires that you're acquainted with your brush and your moisture and how much water you have. And I think the more you get to know your brushes and paper and like how much water you need to get that gentle shade like that, I think that move, like where you make the hard edge and then you fade out, is one of the most powerful moves you can get with watercolor in terms of like getting a sense of shadow and depth and detail. So if you practice, like you can even just do an exercise like this where, let's use a fun color. You just go like this, wet your brush, dry it off, and then fade it out. See, I didn't clean my brush enough, so I had that like weird little line. And just kind of make that a soft transition. You can practice this over and over and over again. If it looks like it's too dark at the line, you probably use too much water. Like if all the pigment is pushing toward the line, you can even that out by adding a little bit more here along the base. Once again, cleaning your brush, feathering it out with a lightly damp brush. So you get that nice soft fade. So that's a gradient wash, just kind of on a micro scale. So that would be my recommendation, is to practice that until you've got a good sense of like how much water and how much like the brush action, etc. So hopefully that helps. You can also let me know like which part of your owl is feeling like a mess, and we can kind of troubleshoot. Angela, a deer maybe. I have only tried to paint one once a while ago for my stepdad, but it was kind of wonky looking and never gave it to him. Oh, I'm sure he would have loved it. I think deer can be really tricky, like horses, deer, anything with that kind of anatomy can be tough. And honestly, while you're learning how to paint, which is a lifelong journey, but I actually trace a lot of things from my reference photos. So I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee. Especially for animals, like with legs, because my focus is on the painting. My focus is not on becoming the best, like, drawing person I can be, because that's not my passion. My passion is in the painting. And quite frankly, like, I think it's just not. One day I would like to become a better drawer for sure. But at this juncture in my life, like, I don't think it's like the best use of my time to painstakingly try to figure out where all the feathers and legs and fur and stuff are, where I can create a really cool effect using watercolor. Who cares if you trace it? You know what I mean? Like, I think there's this push to like be the best at all the kinds of art. And I just don't know that that is worth it if you're really just wanting to focus in on the painting. If your goal is to become like a realism painter person, I think it is a really important and crucial exercise. But I'm just here for the relaxing and the giggles. So I'm going to trace it. Dang it. And I know that's a pretty controversial stance. But I don't know. Does it make you feel better? I don't know. But I did freehand this bird, and I'm very proud of myself because I don't usually do that. So, all right. So we've added some texture to the bird. If I was doing this like intensely, I would for sure add more detail, but let's get into the face. We're excited. Let's zoom in. Oh my gosh, look at those eyes. They're like staring. Sorry. Like staring into your soul. Okay, I think we can do another round of wet and wet on the head. Don't forget to leave the eyeballs out, but we're not going to make this one as wet as we did the first time. It's going to be drier, okay? So like you just mopped and it's starting to evaporate, okay? And I'm kind of okay with it evaporating in some spots because we're going to just add in this color of the darks around the eyes. And the reason why we did wet and wet is because we want it to flow. This is like a fuzzy little bub, okay? So I'm just dancing with my paintbrush in this area where it's a little bit more wet, or where it's a little bit darker. You can see some of it is not super wet, and that's okay. Okay, let's get in here. Oh my gosh. I love this guy. Maybe it's girl, I don't know. How cute are you? Oh my gosh. Okay. Then we got some intense eyes happening here. Like we're starting to see a little beak and get a little fuzzy head action. I mean, again, we could go really granular with this, but actually salt would be a really cool effect on here if you wanted to use some table salt. We could, but I don't really think it's necessary. We're just given the sense of fluffiness, the essence of the fluff, okay? So I'm good with that. I think maybe I'll add in just like a little bit more of that raw umber for like the yellower parts. And here, my paintbrush has like a little bit more water on it than it did for the dark ones because my painting is starting to dry. So I can get away with adding a little bit more water with my paintbrush without it just spreading all over the place. I feel like we're getting a little red action at the top. So let's get some of that dragon's blood. I'm using Mayberry Blue paints today, and I'm here for the dragon's blood. Okay. So I do want to give like, a little depth here because it is, it's behind these feathers, right? So we want it to like look further back. And I want to make sure that line next to the feathers is smooth because our feathers are smooth at the top. Okay. I don't know. This guy is kind of funny. So now that I have some of my color dropped in there, I'm actually going to add just water to soften some of the lines that are a little there. So this is that scumbling technique we used earlier. Okay. And then it looks real weird right now, right? So the next step is adding in the eye. So let's go ahead and blow dry. I'm going to mute you. Okay. So I always do the eyes last. Some people do the eyes first. It just really depends. The reason why I do them last is because if I mess up the rest of the painting, then I haven't looked into this owl's soul yet. I don't know. It makes sense in my head. So I'm mixing up this yellow-green color. Rather than starting with the darks, we're going to start with the lighter colors here. Note that there are some highlights right here in this eye. So we're going to leave that part unpainted. But we're going to do that nice yellow-green over the whole area of the rest of the eye. I don't know. I might actually go back in with like my bleed proof white there just to add some pizzazz. But for now, I think that's good. And it looks extra creepy right now. So, and while this is wet, this is a great opportunity to drop in a little bit of variety. Like you can see that there is maybe like a little bit of brown up here. Ooh, too much. So I'm just kind of soaking up that brown, evening it out with my paintbrush. I've dried off. We're not putting the pupils in yet, just adding any color variety that we've got in here. I want like a little bit more yellow and maybe a little bit more yellow there. And I'm going to add in just a little bit more of that green. I feel like we've got some green. Once again, too much. Cool it, Kate. Just so excited. Okay. I feel good about that. We're going to let that dry. That's kind of, I don't really know what I want to do with the beak, but we're just going to give it a little bit of definition. So right in here, I'm going to, it's got like a little snoot. And then I'm going to, what am I going to do? I'm going to feather it out. It's funny because it's actual feathers. And then I think that just kind of gives me a little bit of that definition. I am going to blow dry these eyeballs so that we can start adding some details. Okay. Oh my gosh, y'all, this is such a long lesson. Thanks for hanging in here with me. I'm just having so much fun. I can't stop. So here we are. Okay, so I'm mixing up a black with my indigo and some of my burnt umber. Sorry, burnt umber. And I'm pretty happy with that. I think I want maybe like a little bit of my dragon's blood. I'm obsessed with this color. Okay, get on in there, dragon. All right, so zoom in, look into his eyes. Let's see, can I get, no, I'm as big as I can get. Okay. Sometimes I'll just like cut, like, I don't know, blow it up as big as my computer screen. I don't know if that's like good or bad. It's kind of helpful to have it like the same size as what you're painting. So right now I'm going to work on, I'm going to work on the rim. I'm not going to use the paintbrush. I'm going to use my other paintbrush. I'm working on the rim of the eyeball. And I'm going to use my paper towel. Okay, that's kind of there. So we're just going to work with that. Okay. And I'm using my very detail-oriented brush. I want this to be a little bit wet when I'm using this. So here we've got kind of a line over the eye. I like it to flow steady, especially when I'm doing these detail straight lines. So when we were doing the feathering of the feathers, we wanted like a really, really dry brush. But for the eyes, I mean, it's kind of like a glossier surface, right? So it makes sense that we'd be wanting like a really glossy, smooth flow of our paintbrush. Kind of, okay. So here I'm just gonna add a little bit of that eye surrounding area. It's a little bit darker here and here. So I'm not using as dark. I'm kind of softening that edge like we did with the feathers. And then getting more of my paint. I mean, I could do like a whole thing on eyeballs. So this is just like cursory eyeball education. All right, and then I'm gonna just add a little bit more dark while this is still wet. And then let's do the pupil. Hi. Hi, buddy. I'm like talking to it like, I don't know. I feel like they're a little bigger. Always better to start small and you can always make them bigger, right? A little harder to make them smaller once they're already there. All right. Okay. Let's work on the other eye. Hello. Actually, I'm going to just kind of tighten up this. I feel like the eyeball shape is a little wonky. A wonky donkey. I got a little bit of the socket here. And once again, rather than looking at like the eyeball, kind of looking at the shapes that the darkness makes. Okay. So we've got that. And let's do this one. Hello. Okay. Just doing the rim. And then at his mysterious eyes. I feel like we've got kind of like a little edge there. This pupil is like really giving me the eye. Hello. I feel like his eyes might be different sizes. And we're here for it. We love our owl. All right. So, all right. I'm gonna, while these pupils are still a little wet, I'm adding some more indigo to really darken them up. All right. And this is, it's pretty quick, so we're not getting into it too much. Now we're gonna add a little bit more of that dark around the eyes, and I'm just taking a dryish brush and just fluffing it there. And I like how this looks over what we already added, that like kind of scumbly look. Okay. Oh, too dark. He's got like really intense eyebrows. It's like when you draw eyebrows on a baby. Have you seen those memes? They crack me up. Okay, I'm just softening this up with a damp, clean brush. So we went a little hard. Then we can add like that kind of in here, give it the eye some shape. All right. Am I loving the eyes? No, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add some more of this yellow-green over the top. I want it to be somewhat wet, but I don't want it to like be super wet that it makes everything run. So I think that's just going to give it a little bit more. Make sure to watch out for the white part of the eye. And let's maybe add just like a little bit of kind of yellowy brown around the bottom, just to give it a little bit more dimension. And I'm going over with like a lightly damp brush to really smooth those lines that we just added to just make them nice and glossy. Okay. His pupils are different colors and it's fine. Or different sizes. It's okay. All right. So let's kind of just add a little bit more definition here around the beak. Oops, I'm getting a call. Oh, decline. Sorry. All right. And this has like a little bit of a highlight here on the tip. Okay. I'm smoothing out. And I think here, let's just add some moss, a little bit of moss to kind of situate our little buddy. Let's like, oh my gosh, he's so big. Ah! Yeah. Just add a little moss, situate our little friend here. Give him a nice little branch so he's not just like floating in the air. Ugh, it's giving me such fall owly vibes. All right. So I know this was a long one. We covered a lot of ground. I think it's helpful to like see the process like over and over again with the shading and stuff. Truly, I do feel like it's one of those things. Once you get that, and once you figure out which brushes you like best for that technique, it can really be a huge game changer in your artwork and bring a whole new dimension to your paintings. So practice, see what you can do. What are we painting today? I forgot. Let's see. What are we painting today? I have no idea. We are painting. Oh, I'm on the totally wrong week. We're painting crystals today. So crystals are actually a really great opportunity to practice some smooth fading. Tomorrow we'll meet back here at 9 a.m. PST, and we are going to find a leaf on the ground, and we are going to paint it. So my daughter is in charge of picking my leaf. You know, I can't stop here. Get it. Stop. Okay. My daughter is going to pick my leaf for me, and we're going to paint it, and we're going to talk about how to like get into, we've talked a lot about like, well, if we were doing this hyper realistic, how would we do it? So that's what we're going to get into. And here's our little owl. It's pretty cute. If I were doing this IRL, like I would add a lot more depth, a lot more layers, a lot more detail. But I think this is a really great start to the concept of layering feathers. So thank you so much for joining, Tracy. I'm so excited to hear about your homework. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for painting with me. As always, it is a treasure to share the love of watercolor with you. All right. See ya mañana. Bye.